Hi everyone. Yes, so today I'm representing Sweden, and I'll get right into it. First off, I want to show you this picture or painting, and it's a beautiful painting showing a woman with an umbrella, and it's actually one of my favorite paintings. And let's look a little bit closer here, because actually it's a painting made out of only dots, and this is a very special technique where artists use pointillist techniques, and it's called neo-impressionism. And you might be asking yourselves, why am I looking at an art piece when we're actually at a science competition? And maybe let's look at another graph, because this is actually something I created out of my research data. And maybe you can kind of see a difference. It's also a pattern, and it also is maybe in its way like beautiful because it's colorful. And in science, this is actually called a heat map. And I know this is a lot. I will get back to this later. But a heat map is basically a very easy way to compress a bunch of information into a very visual way. And yeah, but I'm going to backtrack a little bit to tell you more about how we get to this. Because in my research, I work with bacteria. And bacteria are tiny microorganisms. They're so tiny that about 5,000 bacteria can actually fit into one of your hairs, like in the diameter of one of your hairs. So it's quite small. And they're actually not so... They're very similar to us because they eat, they talk with each other, they also reproduce a little bit differently, but still, and they also poop. And yeah, we will get back to this. But just like us, they also have different personalities. So some bacteria prefer hotter environments, while others prefer colder environments. And they also have different food preferences. Some like to eat fats, some like to eat proteins or fiber. And with these kind of personality traits, we can classify different bacteria. So, for example, a type of bacteria that we all know probably is E. coli. Maybe you've heard of it in the context of contamination or food poisoning. But actually, E. coli and E. coli can be also found inside of us. This can be very surprising, maybe for some of you, because bacteria are not only harmful, they can also have a symbiotic relationship with us. So the symbiotic relationship that we have with bacteria, in one way, is called the gut microbiome. So that is the collection of bacteria in our digestive tract that help us break down food. And this is a very new field. It's only been researched in like the past few 10, 20 years. And the way that we can understand what types of bacteria are in our gut microbiome is by looking at their DNA. Actually, they also have DNA just like us. So with us, the DNA determines things like eye color or our height. But for bacteria, it determines their size or their shapes or their food preferences. So with this information, we can perform something that is called DNA sequencing in science. And DNA sequencing means that we look at the bacteria's type, we look at the DNA of the bacteria, and with that, we can determine what type of bacteria it is. And we can not only determine the type, but also we can count how many times it is present in a sample. So that way, we can kind of see what the populations are made up of, and also we can observe shifts of the bacteria according to different factors. For example, if we're exposed to a lot of stress, we can observe shifts or other environmental factors. And one such factor is our diet. And admittedly, these are not very good drawings, but I tried to visualize two different diets. So the top one is a high-fat diet, and the lower one is supposed to be a piece of lettuce. But this signifies like a fiber-rich diet. It can also be oats or legumes. And if we eat these different diets, different bacteria will reproduce, because the food that we eat is the food that the bacteria eats. So if we eat more burgers, for example, there will be more food for the burger-liking bacteria. And that by itself is interesting. But what is important is that bacteria, they produce something that is called short-chain fatty acids. And these short-chain fatty acids have direct effects on our health. So for example, the short-chain fatty acids that are produced in response to fiber-rich diets can be linked to good health. For example, they can strengthen our stomach lining, or they can make us more resilient to disease. So yes, the main point of this is to show you that our food really drives a lot of impact on our body via the short-chain fatty acids that are produced by the bacteria. And this is when we come back to this graph. So here we can see two different diets that were fed for 12 weeks. There is a fruit diet and a berry diet. And each of these diets has 8 samples by individuals. So in one of these columns, we can see all the bacteria that are present in this sample. And the darker the square, the more of this bacterium is inside of it, or this type of bacterium. And maybe you can already see that actually the patterns are quite different between the fruit and the berry diet. So in the fruit diet, there is higher abundance of bifidobacterium. Or in the berry diet, there is a higher abundance of lactobacillus. And both of these are actually associated with good health. And maybe you don't see that much of a difference yet, but I'll just add the high-fat diet to the mix. And here we can actually see that these bacteria that are very abundant here are not really present in the high-fat diet. So the bacteria that are abundant here, like Enterococcus, they are actually linked with poorer health. And it's kind of crazy to me that we can directly see the results of consuming a certain diet for 12 weeks in how the populations inside of our gut look. And remember how I talked earlier about the short-chain fatty acids? That's why it's important, because different types of bacteria produce different types of short-chain fatty acids that also have different effects on our body. So yeah, that's basically it. And I want to just come back to this painting, finally, because all of these dots that this woman is made of, I kind of like to relate that to us as well, because we're also made out of a lot of dots, but instead they're inside of us in our digestive tract. And yeah, if there's one thing I want you to take away from this, is that maybe remember the words that your parents used, like eat your veggies, because they kind of had a point. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Just stay a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you very much.